Hi, everybody. This is, as far as I can tell, episode 11, and I'm here with Lacey Hinshaw. Today, we're going to be speaking a bit about the industrialization of birth and how it's went from a natural, wonderful entry into the world to a cold, hard, mechanical process. Lacey, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. So, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am Lacey. I am 26 years old. I'm an Aquarius. And I am really into birth, like a lot. It is a fascinating topic to me, and I think it's been really messed up the way it's been usurped from us as people, not just birthing women, but everybody. Everybody gets born. So I think it's really interesting, and I'm really excited to talk about it.
Absolutely. So, how did you come across this information?
So I tried to have a natural birth. I have two babies. I tried to have a natural birth with my first, and it ended up being a vaginal birth, but it was nowhere near natural.
Hmm.
It was the longest, most grueling, painful, horrible experience of my life, and it left me with a lot of postpartum depression and PTSD. And it was entirely avoidable. If I would have just not gone to the hospital when I did, it could have been a lot different. And that got me started down a path of researching why that happened, why it has to be like that, why did they do those things to me, and what's the alternative? And it led me to, when I became pregnant with my second child, researching unhindered physiological birth. And I was just blown away. And it led me down a path of realizing that it's not just about being safe. It's not just about being at the hospital just in case anything goes wrong and the doctors can save me. It's about being controlled.
Hmm.
And birthing in the hospital is about, you're expected to be a good girl and do what
Mm.
they say. You're expected to not have authority over your own body. And when I realized what the alternative could be and how it's so empowering and amazing and perfect for women and babies. And again, everybody gets born. So how you enter the world affects you. The trauma that you experience during birth and pregnancy affect you as a human being. And it makes you easier to control and to be born into a slave system if you if you're born into trauma, essentially.
Yeah, it seems like if a baby is malleable clay, then it seems like they're shaping it in utero. Like they're already turning us into slaves before. And then when we get out, it takes still the trauma, like continuous trauma. They have to traumatize us. But if you're already coming out and you're scared and you're like, you've been hurt, and that's what you originally knew is this bipolar. You get hurt, then you get some love, then you get hurt, then you get some love. It's okay, it's not okay. It seems like to me sometimes I wonder what what chance do we have if that's what happened to us. Then it's oftentimes you see this system and it's churning people out and it just doesn't make sense. How could we get away from this? But I could see if we weren't already being traumatized so much, it seems that we'd have infinite possibility compared to this very narrow band we have of what we can do when we've been hurt like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you give a brief rundown of how like a routine hospital pregnancy and birth occurs?
Yeah. So it starts with conception, of course. A lot of times babies are created as a byproduct of sex rather than intentionally being conceived, which affects your soul. I mean, I don't mean to get like too into it, but like if you are if your mom gets pregnant with you and her
Mm-hmm.
first thought is, oh shit, oh fuck, what am I gonna do? I
Mm.
mean, how can that not welcome a spirit and kind of it's being wanted um, affects a person. And even
Absolutely.
if your loves you so much and you're the best thing that ever happened to her, um, it does matter if her first thought was, oh shit, what am I gonna do? Um, so conception matters a lot. And then so a lot of people just haphazardly conceive this baby and then they go to the doctor because that's what you do when you get pregnant in the Western world. You go to the doctor and they track your period for you and tell you when the due date is, even if you know exactly when you conceived, they will tell you, no, based on your last period, this is when you're due. And that really matters when it comes down to the end of pregnancy because a few days could mean they're going to force you to induce. They won't allow you to birth naturally, even if they were the ones who got your conception date wrong.
Hmm.
So they do some blood work, take the blood. I mean, they do ultrasounds at maybe a month, well, a little after a month, like 5 to 8 weeks is when they usually do the first ultrasound.
That's like heating the baby, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So ultrasounds are it's ultrasound. I mean, it's high frequency. It's basically the same thing as X-ray or like the radiation from our cell phones, EMF radiation. It's ultrasonic frequency directed at that fetus, which affects the way DNA makes sound. I mean, every everything's vibration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So DNA makes this beautiful music in this world that we can't hear. But when it's affected by that ultrasound, it it takes on that single frequency pitch that the ultrasound is beaming at the baby. I'm not sure if I'm explaining this right, but it's not good. And that rapid heating or that rapid sound hitting the baby's little atoms,
Mm-hmm.
it heats it up, and that also, I mean, heat affects the way a baby is going to develop. I mean, anything develops if you put radiation on a plant, it's going to affect its development. And it's
Is
no different with the child.
is this how
So,
the mitochondria get hurt or damaged, changed?
yeah, so it damages the cells, the powerhouse of the cell, and affects how it's going to affect or how it's going to work long term. So each blast of radiation can be incredibly damaging. It could maybe not show up at all, but you never really know. But a lot of people, um, you get the bare minimum of at least 3 ultrasounds during pregnancy. One for a dating scan to tell you how big your baby is and when you're going to be due, according to them. Another one at about 20 weeks of gestation, which is an anatomy scan to make sure the baby is forming right. And they'll measure the baby, and it can last from as long as 15 minutes to up to an hour of ultrasonic radiation beaming at your baby. And it gets hot on your belly. I mean, it's not just inside you. I mean, you feel it.
I've had an ultrasound when I had hepatitis C. They were like just putting it on me, and I was like, "This is really warm." And they're, "Oh, it's just supposed to be. That's okay." And I remember thinking like, "I wonder what this is doing." And why is it so warm? Because it's doing something. It's not that the thing itself is like heated and hot. It might be heated and hot because of the vibration in there, but when they were like, "Oh, it's supposed to do that," they always tell you this. It's supposed to do that. We're supposed to cut your baby's penis. We're supposed to give you a vaccine.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's exactly how it needs to be.
So after the ultrasounds and stuff, I interrupted you, so I apologize. But
No,
go
that's
go
okay.
keep going through the birth process.
Yeah, so you get ultrasounds, you get at least 3 up to, I mean, some people have had almost 20 ultrasounds during a pregnancy, which really could affect the way a baby comes out. I mean, it just, how could it not? When you're heating the DNA like that. So anyway, so throughout the pregnancy, you get at about 30 to 35 weeks, a lot of doctors will start doing cervical checks on you. And a cervical check is when they insert their hand into you and check your cervix and see how it's dilating, how it feels as far as like the softness or firmness. Because they want to know if you're preparing to go into labor yet. The thing is, that tells you literally nothing about when you're going to have your baby, how long your labor is going to be. And it can be incredibly violating. And it's completely unnecessary. There's no reason to be sticking your hands up there. Because a lot of times, I mean, women will dilate to a centimeter to 4 centimeters a week, weeks before they deliver. And it literally tells you nothing about how long the labor is going to be. And not only is it potentially traumatizing, there's how many women are victims of sexual violence. I mean, it can be really triggering for people. But it also increases the chance of infection. A lot of times, if you're in a long labor, which a lot of times women's first labors will be very long because that's just how we are. And not always, but a lot of times, especially when you're observed during labor, because you've never seen a cat give birth in front of everybody. They go to a small, safe place, and they find somewhere that's peaceful and quiet, and they do what they do.
Well, I don't know if you've ever had to pee in front. I mean, I imagine, like you're not like totally prissy or stuck up, but I don't know if you've ever had to pee like right in front of somebody when somebody's looking at you or talking to you. It's like incredibly hard. It makes you feel. What's that?
Sorry. Have you had somebody try to help you pee?
No, that's.
I mean, they're like touching you. They're all up in your business and expecting your body to do this process, this natural process. It's like, yeah, it's really hard to get into that space because it just goes against everything that our mammal brain tells us to do when we're in labor. I mean, same as like, sorry.
That's fine. You're good. You're good.
So yeah, it's really difficult to get into that space during labor, to be observed, to have somebody putting their hands inside of you, trying to tell you that you're not progressing fast enough, or that you are on a timeline. Because when you get into the hospital, they'll check your cervix to admit you. They'll check your cervix every hour or two to see how you're progressing. And they're putting that pressure on you. You're not progressing fast enough, or sure, you're progressing fine, you'll have a baby by dinner time. And, maybe you don't have a baby by dinner time. They want to go home. They don't want to sit here and stay all night watching you labor. Which I know that sounds like nobody would do that. Nobody would actually do that and put that kind of pressure on a woman. But they do.
Doctors are, I have trouble, the common person, when you go in there to have your first baby, you have trouble believing that, like, they would do something like this, that they would be so narcissistic and be so detached from this. But those doctors were born in the same damn hospitals as you and I.
Mm-hmm. They were. And a lot of times they just don't realize what kind of trauma they have gone through, what kind of trauma they're putting on you when they treat you as if what they're doing matters. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in labor, when you're having a baby, nothing else matters except for what's going on inside of you and what that baby is telling you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So like another thing is when you're in labor or when you're pregnant at the end of pregnancy, the baby decides when you go into labor. You can't make yourself go into labor. You can do a lot of things to stimulate that. You can stimulate oxytocin. A lot of times will help. But ultimately, it comes down to when the baby decides it's time to come out.
Naturally, right?
Exactly. Yeah, naturally. But a lot of times, again, doctors will have scheduled vacations, or it'll be a holiday, or whatever. There's plenty of reasons that a doctor would choose to induct you for non-medical reasons. And that's another way of taking the power away from the baby, from telling the baby before it's even born, we decide what you're going to do in life, when you're going to do it. And it doesn't matter what you want to do because, I mean, I don't know.
It's a process. We're processed. And so if, like we were talking about the clay, right? At the start, if at the very start of the process we're victimized just left and right. It's just like boom, 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 boom. We just did these four things to you, and you didn't want them. Your mom probably didn't even want them, but they got done and they had to be done. Then, later when somebody says, get down on your knee before the state, accept that they're your Lord and Master, that they know better than you, that they can tell us when we should circumcise our children, when we should give them vaccines. And it's like we were talking about, you come out of the gate and then you're already beholden to the system.
Mm-hmm.
So what do they do to us once we get out? I mean, I know the birth is traumatic. I know there's all types of stuff involved in that. But what goes on when we go through all that trauma inside and then we get out? Do they treat us any better now that they can see our faces?
It would have you think so. But what happens when you get born a lot of times, and each hospital can be a little bit different as far as what exactly happens. Some hospitals are now starting to do skin to skin immediately. But they clamp your cord, for one thing. And a lot of times nowadays, what's becoming common is delayed cord clamping, but they delay it for like a minute or 2 minutes. Now, 60% of your blood when you're born is inside the placenta. It's trying to make its way into the baby, but to make it through the birth canal, it's easier for the baby to have this blood on the outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what they do is they clamp it right away, and even if it's a minute or two, that's still not enough time for all the blood to come back to the baby. So what that does is that puts the baby into distress when they clamp it right away. I mean, imagine having only 40% of your blood supply. You're not going to be all right, right? And even it's all right based on what they decide is normal, but it's going to affect you. It affects the amount of vitamin K in your body.
That's why they give you the shot, then, huh?
That's why they give them the shot, because the vitamin K is what it'll coagulate the blood. It makes the blood thicker and keeps you from bleeding out or hemorrhaging.
Mm-hmm.
So what they do is they clamp the cord right away, and then they stick you with the shot of vitamin K. And this vitamin K, they say it's not a vaccine, but which it's not. It's not a vaccine because it's not a immunoglobulin that's preventing any disease. It's a vitamin, but it's made with an aluminum adjuvant. So, I mean, you come out of the baby, well, you come out of the womb and you're shot with aluminum. And they put eye ointment in the baby's eyes. The eye ointment is erythromycin, and it's to prevent infection from gonorrhea. They do this routinely to every single baby that comes through the hospital, unless you literally fight to have them not do that. And the erythromycin, it can hurt the baby, obviously. It's an antibiotic, which is anti-life. I mean, that, it hurts your bacteria, your natural bacterias.
Right.
So they put this in your eye, and the baby's eyes. The baby can't see. That first few hours of after being born is when a mother and a baby should be bathing in oxytocin dumps. And a lot of that is stimulated through eye contact. I mean, gazing into your newborn's eyes it's like a shortcut for the biggest oxytocin dump of your life. I mean, there's nothing like it. And oxytocin is the love hormone, the bonding hormone. That's what bonds you to your baby.
And they try to give that to us synthetically as well, correct?
Yeah, so let's talk about Pitocin in a minute.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, because I want to talk all about oxytocin and Pitocin because, well, anyway. So they put the eye ointment in the baby's eyes so that they can't see the moms. They can't make eye contact with mom and dad. They put a hat on the baby, which affects the pheromones that you're able to smell. They'll grab the baby with a washcloth and scrub all the vernix off of it. The vernix is oh gosh, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Let's hear it for a second.
You just gather your thoughts. We can edit it out later, and if not,
okay.
I'm totally retarded. You can just blame it on me.
No need. I'm trying to think of a way to describe the vernix because, I mean, it looks cheesy and gross, but it's like really important. Okay, I think I'm ready. Okay, so they pick the baby up and scrub it off with a washcloth and scrub all the vernix off of it. And the vernix is, I think it's called vernix caseola, and it's basically a bloom. If you've ever had chickens that lay eggs, you'll know that the eggs come out with a bloom that keeps them fresh. And if you wash off the eggs, it'll spoil.
It's a coating? It's a coating?
Yeah, it's a coating. It's a bacterial coating. And the same thing with babies. It's a bacterial coating, but it's good. It's full of very important stem cell type of healing bacteria.
God made it. God made it. It's like a power suit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's born, babies weren't made to be born into a sterile environment. It's protective. So they scrub the vernix off of you or off your baby, which affects the pheromones. It affects the baby's receptivity to heat and cold and bacteria. And scrub the baby off, put a hat on it. You can't smell your baby. It's, again, blocking that bonding that goes on when you have a baby, immediately after you have a baby, and you're smelling the smells and you're feeling the feels. And then they wrap it up in a swaddle. And a swaddle is a blanket that wraps them up tight, and everybody thinks that it mimics the womb. That's the idea. They want to mimic the womb to make it more comfortable for the baby. That's what they tell people. But in reality, it's a straight jacket. The baby just came out of the womb. It's natural for it to move and to feel free and to explore its limbs and feelings. And skin to skin is so important. Again, with the bonding, with adjusting heat, because the baby just came out of the womb, a very warm, comfortable, cozy place, and into this cold, cold world. I mean, unless you're in the jungle or something, it's pretty cold when you come out of the womb for the first time.
In Seattle, it definitely is.
Yeah, so skin to skin is so important when it comes to regulating that temperature and establishing that bonding. But a swaddle, what that does is it takes away those bonding opportunities, takes away that temperature regulation, and it puts the baby into a state of, they might be crying because all this stuff is happening to them right after they come out of the womb. And it puts them into a state of dissociation because they literally can't handle being they can't handle the trauma of being wrapped up and made not to move and completely separated from the natural processes that should happen after a baby is born.
Mm-hmm.
So then, a lot of times they'll circumcise the baby too. And I don't want to get too far into this, but circumcision is literally torturing a baby. If it's a boy, or girls in Africa. But the circumcision, they don't do anesthetics, they don't take painkillers at all, because it's unethical to give painkillers to a baby, which they're often born with painkillers already in the system from the epidural.
We're gonna get into this later, because I have personal experience with long half-life opiate maintenance and the women that got pregnant on that, and a ton of the children that I knew they'd come out of the womb addicted to opiates, and then they're spending the first week or so in a NIC unit on a morphine drip, and it's like the most unconscionable thing. And this is often the case I find in the medical mafia is they will say, this is unconscionable, we would not do that, but it's literally what they were just doing. It's what they were doing 5 minutes ago, and then something changes, and they're like, well, now that's not okay. But if you're giving babies methadone in the womb and you're giving them morphine when they come out, there's all these double standards. And I see this as well where, Dr. Drew or Dr. Oz, he's like, when I go home, I'm Mr. Oz, and my wife won't vaccinate the kids. And he's like, we won't do that, but you guys should. How? Why?
I can't fathom, honestly. I really don't have an answer for you because I can't fathom the mental gymnastics it takes to do this to anybody, let alone an infant baby. It's just unimaginable to me. But yeah, the circumcision, they'll strap the baby, each of its limbs, to this board and cut the tip of the penis, the skin of the penis, the protective skin of the penis off. With no painkillers, it's traumatizing. Can you imagine being strapped to a board, having a pacifier stuck in your mouth, and experiencing that with no painkillers, no love, no, just sterile, cold. It's cruelty.
I was circumcised when I was 13 because I had an issue with my foreskin. But that was traumatizing. Afterwards, I did feel like I had been attacked and like there was something different, like I got robbed of a piece of my manhood. And
Mhm.
I was out cold, they put me on a ton of painkillers. They put me out. And I remember thinking, God, those poor little boys, like, this was hard for me. I can only imagine what that would do to your mind at that point. I'm fortunate that I didn't have that happen, but most people do. Unfortunately, that's the way of the modern world. And this goes back to this Kabbalist Luciferian groups that are involved in this, and they were able to pull that off using a religious excuse thousands of years ago, and it's amazing how these things are in modern medicine. In modern times, we have good enough scientific data. We know that's not a good idea. We know it's the cost benefit ratios out the window. What do you get from it? You don't have to clean under your foreskin, and
Right.
but it traumatizes you for the rest of your life. It's just
Yeah, I mean, it literally breaks the mind of an infant. I mean, within the first day or two of birth. And it depends on, a lot of people will do it, okay, first week or so of birth.
mm-hmm.
Um, it breaks the mind of an infant, which is what they do with the satanic ritual abuse. Um, it's it's about creating that disassociation, creating that ability to leave the body and say, this is okay, I'm gonna be okay, I'm gonna forget about this, and I'm gonna be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because what else are you gonna do? I mean, you're picked up by your mother afterwards and saying, it's okay, baby, it's okay, I've got you, you're safe. And it's trauma bonding. It's trauma bonding you to your family, for one thing, um, which is also creating rifts of how can I trust someone who did this to me, who allowed this to happen to me? You're supposed to keep me safe.
Right.
Also trauma bonding you to the doctors, the system, the establishment, the Kabbalistic rituals that we're made to go through, because you're accepting this as part of your life because you have to. I mean, a baby can't just say, this is some bullshit, I'm gonna die now.
Right.
That's not how it works.
Or defend itself. You don't have any opportunity to defend yourself, and so then later, when you get victimized and you get exposed to all this cold, harsh stuff, it seems like, well, you know, inherently, there was a time at which I was traumatized and hurt as a young man or a young person. And now I have to do that same thing. I have to recede into the depth of my subconscious or my unconscious mind where I can accept that I deserve this. This is how I should be treated. This is acceptable. It's not acceptable. And that's the whole hiccup in the giddy up. That's one of the biggest holes in the Swiss cheese is that you and I were brought into this world, and even regardless of what we think or how we learned it before we were old enough to learn about the New World Order and why they're, traumatizing us in utero. We learned at a very early age that it's okay for authority figures to hurt you. It's for your best interest, which is, it just blows your mind. How are we doing this? And how is it that there's not more people in the medical field who are standing up and going, "Hey, guys, come on. Like seriously, this is fucked up." Is there people? Does anyone say this is bad?
Circumcision specifically, or the whole deal?
The whole deal.
Not really. Not the actual medical authorities. They're trained into it. I mean, a lot of times they think they're doing the best thing for the families they're servicing. Um, they think what they're doing is the best. They're trained to think that I know what's best for this baby and this family. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that they're treated in the way that's safest for them. So a lot of doctors, medical professionals, care providers, midwives even, are trained to think that what they're doing is the best and it is the safest, and that they're doing an essential service to these people by hurting them. So even midwives, you would think that a midwife would be more educated on physiological birth and how to have a safe home birth, or even in a hospital, have a safe birth that's mother-led. But they're not. A lot of times the certified professional midwives they're licensed, which means they're bound by the state to serve the state and not the mother. Like, they have to do cervical checks a lot of times in some states. They're required to check the cervix X amount of times before the delivery and during the delivery. They're required to hand over their client to an obstetrician if they go past 41 weeks of pregnancy. They will lose their job if they don't serve these state regulated requirements, which are hurting mothers and babies across the world. So yeah, I can't imagine being in a line of work where you think that hurting somebody is doing the best for them. But that's how it is. And I try not to hold it against them because their indoctrination is so strong. But I can't help but wonder, why aren't you looking into this? Why can't you have the clarity of mind to look past your ego?
And we're gonna unpack that big time, because that's a huge question I have. Is what are the karmic repercussions for these doctors? What are they for the parents? Because if we suffer from ignorance, sometimes that can be an involuntary response to a lack of education. Sometimes it can be an involuntary response to brainwashing. However, it doesn't mean that we can shirk whatever responsibility. Like, if those doctors think that they're doing this stuff and they're going to roll up to the pearly gates and not have to answer for it because they were too stupid to look into it, I put it to them like, you guys are going to be in the fucking 7th level of hell if you're using that as an excuse. I think that's almost worse than just saying, I know, but I got to make my damn paycheck.
Right.
It's really tough when we get into responsibility. So we're gonna try to unpack some of these quicker, just because, and I'll just ask them and I'll interrupt you if we're going too long, just simply because I got a lot of them here.
Right. Yeah.
What kind of complications or conditions can arise from trauma in the pregnancy and birth process? And just give us maybe some of the common ones, and we'll go from there, because I can only imagine it's probably everything, every metabolic abnormality, every hormonal abnormality. Like, what couldn't happen?
Well, so when you're receiving a bunch of ultrasounds and vaccinations, they push vaccinations on pregnant women. Even when the labels say, this is not for pregnant women, this has not been tested on pregnant women, this is not proven safe for pregnant women, they will push vaccinations, including, I'm going to get into RhoGAM a little bit. RhoGAM is not quite a vaccination, but it's an immunoglobulin that is pushed on pregnant women that are Rh negative. And I've learned that 53%, okay, now, this was a legitimate article that I found on the internet from NCDI or whatever it is. 53% of autistic people in this study that I read were born to Rh negative mothers. And I suspect that RhoGAM has a lot to do with that. RhoGAM is a shot that is given to Rh negative people when they're pregnant. Supposed to be pregnant with a baby that might be Rh positive, meaning the father is Rh positive, but all kinds of people, every Rh negative person is given it just in case they're lying about who the father is and what their blood type is, which is another way of undermining authority and stuff. But anyway, so 53% of autistic children in this survey of like 1,300 people were born to Rh negative mothers. And I really suspect that the RhoGAM has a lot to do with that, which is a lot. So vaccine injury in utero is a potential complication, including encephalitis, which is swelling of the brain, inflammation of the brain. And also ultrasound opens up the blood-brain barrier, which when you're vaccinated and ultrasounded in the same appointment, that's a 1-2 punch of like brain damage.
Well, the 60 nanometer aluminum particulates are able to get through the blood-brain barrier anyways. And so if the prenatal vaccines open it up more, then it's like that's like the least safe time to give somebody a vaccination is
yeah, absolutely.
Or to give them any of this stuff. It's unconscionable. But so vaccine injury, you said, is common or can be.
Yeah. So there's the risk for vaccine injury. There's during the birth process, a lot of what they're doing to you blocks hormonal processes from happening, and I'll get into those in a little bit. But it blocks oxytocin from being released. It blocks the bonding hormones. It blocks the endogenous painkillers.
Mm-hmm.
Endorphin comes from endogenous morphine. It's
Mm-hmm.
powerful stuff. And when you're birthing, under observation with people touching you and telling you you're not doing it fast enough, it really affects, it really limits the capacity to release those endorphins and oxytocin. So being robbed of those things can cause all kinds of hormonal issues. When a baby is born with limited oxytocin dumps, that damages the oxytocin receptors, which means that baby goes into life with much fewer oxytocin receptors than a baby that was born into love and calmness and peace would, meaning that its capacity to love is affected for its whole life. I mean, that is insane, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's creating people that are prone to violence. When they're born into trauma, they're more willing to accept trauma and to potentially cause trauma. So when you come into the world with damaged oxytocin receptors, it predisposes you to, it limits your capacity to love in the future, to experience and to share and to produce those hormones, the oxytocin, to make bonds with other people, to love your neighbor, to love your family, to love anything. It affects your capacity to do that, which also, being disassociated from the trauma that you experience at birth predisposes you to disassociating yourself from experiencing violence and from also causing violence and like policemen, the people who beat up people who are who are chained to the ground and they
Mm-hmm.
kick them in the head. Those people, that's fucked up. I mean, their brains are messed up to be able to do that and to go home and sleep at night. So it creates a generation of people who are not only willing to accept trauma, but to perpetrate trauma onto other people. It also, in the immediate birth world, it affects your ability to breastfeed or to produce breast milk if you're a mother. When you are prevented from having those hormone dumps, the oxytocin dumps, that's what stimulates the letdown of breast milk colostrum, which is the most important part of breast milk. Um, and it inhibits that relationship of, again, having a long-term relationship with your child. Not only like a spiritual relationship, the closeness of having those regular oxytocin releases with your baby, but also the health of your baby. Because we can go on about how fed is best. I mean, I guess formula is better than a baby that has nothing at all. But breast milk is designed for your baby's health to be the best it can possibly be. It's alive. Formula is dead material entering your baby.
Not yo
Charles
mama.
talks about how plant essence is life, and consuming plants that are fresh and alive is so important to your health and to making your body alive. And it's the same deal with breast milk versus formula. That affects you long term also. I mean, yeah.
I know a bunch of children that were raised never on the teat, and a lot of them are sell dope. They're in gangs. They've been in a lot of trouble, and I know other children that were raised for 3 years on the teat. Like 2 3 years, which I've heard is actually preferable, or like ideally you want to breastfeed your children for a long time, and they have far more opportunity. They're far more loving. They're generally more well behaved and generally happier. And this doesn't it does it seems like feeding a baby formula would be an insane thing, right? To people previously, like if you were not going to breastfeed your baby, that was one thing. People did do that, but then they had someone else breastfeed their baby. No, the first person that was like, hey, let's take cow's milk and give it to infants instead of mother's milk, they're fucking working for the Rockefellers, or they're a goddamn eugenicist, because as far as they can remove us from nature is as far as they want to take it. They want us to literally grow up where our mother is the state, where we could live with our mother, but they they can tell our mothers, feed them this formula. That'll be better. It'll be good. It's sterile or something.
Exactly. And it's better than what you can do for your child. We know what's best for your child better than you do. We can feed your child better than we can. Yeah, and it's teaching women that they're not good enough also. I mean, it's training people to be dependent on the system,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately. And it's just messed up.
So I've heard that since the 1970s to this day, we have 60% less sperm, male children or males. And this will not show up until they're in their 20s and find they're unable to have children. Um, Here's my big question, because I like to think long term, or I like to look towards the future. I hope for a brighter future, but I just want to be aware of what's going on. Is the eugenics agenda already in the bag? Can we even replace the population of decent humans that aren't just woolly bullies? Or are we doomed to watch this degrade into lower and lower levels of devolution? Have they already tied this up? Because people talk about eugenics like they're gonna, come in and kill us all with a shot or something. But if you've sterilized the people and there's only a few people left that aren't sterilized, there's if there is children, there's not going to be enough to be smart and wise.
Well, I'm not sure what to say about that exactly. There's, hmm, well, there's a lot of factors that can be incorporated into fertility. Just because somebody is sterile right now doesn't necessarily mean they're sterile forever.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of factors can be responsible for that, like your diet or your lifestyle. And I know it's out of control for a lot of people. It's out of their control completely. And that is just sickening. I mean, I don't know what to say about that because it's just a crime that people are sterilized. I mean, it's a crime that no one's being persecuted for or punished for it, except for those that cannot reproduce now. Um, but what I can say is there's a lot of people that are waking up, and maybe I'm just hopeful. Maybe I just really, really, really want other people to be as awake and aware as we are, as our community is. Um, but there's a lot of people that are taking back birth. Myself, I free birthed my second baby because I refused to go back into the system again. I knew what was going to happen there, and I chose to have an unassisted, mostly unassisted pregnancy and unassisted birth at home, um, in which I was able to have a full physiological birth. I had all the hormone releases um, that I was designed to have. Um, it was, I mean, truly miraculous. And there are people out there, there's groups of people who are committing to taking back birth and doing this and refusing to be a good girl and lay on your back and let them do all this to you. So I have hope that people are waking up and that there are more people being born um, into love and into peace and into the power of the people that we're meant to be. Um, but I see a lot of sleeping people too, so I don't know. I'm hopeful that people are starting to wake up, and I'm hoping that if even one person is born into love and empowerment because of something I said, then I'll have contributed to society. But yeah, so I'm hopeful. I really am.
It's totally worth it to be hopeful, and I try to be. Sometimes I struggle to, and sometimes I have lost all hope. But that's uh, that's what I wanted to hear, was that it's not too late. We still have a chance, guys. We can still have our children. It's not legislated that we have to do this. This is up to
Exactly.
us. I don't think they're ever gonna tell us we made a huge mistake, you guys. We made a giant mistake. All of the babies have been being harmed by this. Now we're going to do it the right way. No, but it's still not illegal. You're not going
No,
to go to jail.
right. So birthing unassisted is not illegal in any state or anywhere, as far as I know. But people will have you think that it's so wrong and it's so dangerous, and that you're doing a bad thing to your family and to the world, essentially, by birthing unassisted. But it really is up to us to decide that the alternative is not the best thing for our babies or our families or the world. And to decide, this is my human right to birth where and with whom I want. And it's okay, and I'm going to do it. And there are people all over the world that are doing that, myself included. And it is incredibly empowering. It's creating empowered mothers. It's creating empowered babies who are going to grow up to be, they're going to have an increased capacity to bring something to society, I think.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that we still have that power, folks. It's not, it doesn't seem like there's much we can do sometimes, but we forget that we're still allowed to do a lot. This is not communist China. Not yet. Not yet. And so I always try to encourage myself and other people, let's use however many rights we have left, let's use them. Let's use them so that in the future, our children will have those same rights, or hopefully better ones.
Exactly, and it is up to us to decide, this isn't working. Sorry.
You okay?
I had a thought. Oh, okay. So when you find out that what's going on isn't the best thing that's happening to babies and people, you're being drugged to the crossroads. And that happened to me with my first baby. I wanted a natural birth. And I was drugged to the crossroads, and I decided to pursue a natural birth in a hospital, and I allowed people to tell me what I was allowed to do and what I was allowed not to do, and I was literally tortured. Actual literal torture. I was starved. I was humiliated. And I had gone to the crossroads, and I had decided that I wasn't going to make the choice to do what I thought was best. And I realized pretty quickly after that probably wasn't the best decision for me. So yeah, it is up to us to come to the crossroads and decide, am I going to do something about this? Am I going to be responsible for, you wanted to talk about the karmic responsibility. Once you're at the crossroads and you see that these are your options, once you know it, it's your responsibility, what happens to your baby, the trauma that you and your partner and your child will endure because of choosing not to choose or choosing to trust the system. It becomes your responsibility. And I paid a karmic debt, apparently, or I'm paying a karmic debt. It was incredibly obvious that had I trusted myself and had I decided to pursue the truth, even when it was scary and even when other people were telling me, no, you need to go to the hospital, it's the safest thing to do, I paid for it. And people are paying for it all across the world. And not only are people paying for this, but they're thinking that the doctors are saving them, even when the doctor is causing the trauma. The USA is one of the number one nations of maternal mortality during childbirth. So
How
that
the
means women dying in childbirth, women are dying in childbirth at a higher rate in the US than in other places in the world. And that is ridiculous. I
yeah.
mean, 98% of people are giving birth in hospitals on their backs. And yet we still have a maternal mortality rate that's higher than most other nations in the world.
It's like the prison population. You know, they will tell you this is the safest place in the world. They'll tell you we have the most advanced medicine. Well, if that's the case, why do we have more per capita people incarcerated inside of locked jails? Because we're the safest place in the world. What? Because we lock up more people than anywhere else, or we're the best place to give birth? What? Because the more women die here per capita than elsewhere. Like we look at these other countries where people do things naturally, and we look at them with disdain, like, oh man, those people over there, they're just savages. They don't know any better.
Yeah,
They may as well
very
be.
savage.
They're just stupid. That's what we think. And then if we take a look at what is actually going on, and you look at the numbers, well, no, numbers don't lie. Why would more women be dying here if we had the best medicine? It just wouldn't happen.
It doesn't make sense. And the more you look into it, the more it doesn't add up. And choosing to still go into that system, I think, um, yeah, you're taking on that karmic responsibility for what happens, like you were saying.
Not to choose is to choose.
Exactly, exactly.
So what about, and I know that you have two children, and one is home birth, the other is not. Do you have experience of your own or other than that where you could compare the relationships of home birth children and Luciferian cabal birth babies with their parents? Now, I'm not trying to dig in. If you want to talk about you and your children, but I don't want them to watch this one day and be like, what? The Luciferian cabal delivered me?
Great. Well, I don't have a whole lot of experience with other people's children like that. I can tell from my own control group that um, my home birth baby is a lot more relaxed. He's a lot more chill. More he is advancing more quickly. He's only 8 months old, and he is like practically running already. I mean, he's walking and practically running. Um, he seems brighter. And I don't mean to say that my other child is not, because my other child is also incredibly bright.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't have the attachment issues that
Mm.
my other one did. With my first child, I experienced, I mean, it nearly killed me, the postpartum depression. I honestly was going to kill myself because it was incredibly traumatizing. Everything went wrong. And it was a perfectly routine birth, too. It wasn't even like a bad birth. There was no emergency. It was just long and drawn out, and I was tortured and starved and abused under the
Mm-hmm.
guise of, we're doing the best thing for you. Um, he was taken away right after I gave birth to him, which when your baby is taken away immediately after birth, no mammal does that. No mammal hands over their baby to somebody else, to a stranger, to have them examined and to watch them cry. It's incredibly traumatizing. It breaks the mind. So experiencing that put a lot of trauma on me and my baby, and I think it's evident in our relationship. It's just, I mean, I've healed a lot, both of us have, but there's a lot to work through when you experience something like that. And my home birth baby is just way more chill. He's just a little trooper. And my recovery, also my physical recovery after my first one, I mean, I couldn't sit for a month without hurting. I had to go to the ER 10 days postpartum without my baby, which is incredibly traumatizing because I literally could not urinate past my wounds, which would not have happened if I was allowed to push according to when my baby told me to push instead of pushing when they told me to push. I literally tore things and broke things inside myself that wouldn't have happened if I would have listened to my body instead of the doctors. And then with my home birth baby, I felt fine afterwards. I felt great even. I was ecstatic. And physically, the recovery was maybe a couple of days until I felt like a human being again. So that affected me a lot too.
No depression.
Physical.
No depression this time?
What's that?
No depression this time with the new baby?
Yeah, no, a little anxiety because of some abusive ex-husband stuff, but no, not any postpartum depression I had with my first one that was all interrupted by the medical system.
Okay, so
I can't speak for other women, unfortunately, but yeah, there was a huge difference for me.
Okay, so I asked some long questions, but this one's good. This type of torture / love dynamic sets us up to love and trust our captors. We talk about sheep, and I personally think we're all responsible for what happens to our children, and they one day for what happens to them. But in all reality, do they or their parents have any chance? Do people know deep down that this is not healthy and they're simply stuffing those emotions down, going along to get along? I wonder if they have any opportunity to have their children in a loving and safe environment. It seems that if you'll let them slice your baby boy's foreskin off and letting them shoot mercury and aluminum and aborted fetal cells into your child, that child and you didn't really have an opportunity to make a good decision, a safe decision. Like, if we don't know that, how do we get out of it? Do we in the truth community need to be banging the drum on this louder? Because it seems like right now, the common person doesn't have a chance. I know people that have tons of children and they're smart too, but they just never heard of this stuff.
Well, I mean, I think it's ultimately up to the individual and where they're at as far as becoming awake and becoming in tune with their divine self. And I don't mean to get all woo-woo, but if you're willing to admit that these things are messed up, what happened to you was messed up, then you have the chance to fix that for the future. If you come to the crossroads and realize that you have a choice, I do think we do have a chance as a people, because like I was born medicated.
Mm-hmm.
I was born to trauma. My mom experienced trauma and pain because of my birth and because of me. But I was able to move past that. And I mean, so many women across the world are finally starting to wake up to that. Not enough people even realize that there's a problem though. So that's why I'm here talking about it to you, because I mean, I'm pretty nervous about this. And I
That's
think
a
it's really important for people to know that we do have a choice. Every human being, every woman has the right to choose where and with whom she gives birth. She has the right to informed consent and bodily autonomy. And not enough people realize that because they will flat out tell you, no, you don't have the right to do that. Our
right.
hospital policy overrides your right to choose, which really, the biggest hospital policy is your right to informed consent. And it is
Hmm.
being denied to women across the country, across the world, but especially in the US.
And
It is being flat out denied.
when
And women are accepting that because they have no idea there's an option.
for sure, when they try to tell us this is what I say, you guys. I do not consent, and I was never asked. That's what's important here. It's in general, we give the go ahead to be screwed over all the time. But that's tacit consent. That's something where you're not asked, but we don't speak up against it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when you were never asked, if you can claim that and say, I do not consent and I was never asked, there's a great power in that. In that, people then must respect your opinion. You say, I don't will that. I don't will you to vaccinate my baby. I don't will you to give me an ultrasound. Then people respect your power. Then they
Mm-hmm.
then they're like, oh, okay, oh, we get it, sir. Now, okay, all right. If you just say, I don't know, that doesn't seem like a good idea, all that happens is they just shove you into a little box of a fool that they can push around because you didn't say no. You didn't say
Mm-hmm.
no. And so we need to start saying no to things that they're not asking us if they can do because they don't tell us this, but you can still say no.
Exactly. And that's huge in the birth world that I was never asked in the first place. They're assuming that you consent to being treated by them, whatever it takes. Um, so they'll assume that they have the authority to do this. They won't ask you. They will tell you this is what we're doing, or they'll just do it without even asking, which happened to me. Um, which is obstetrical rape. When somebody does something, puts something in your body, or for example, I was told I was getting a cervical check, and they swept my membranes, which is a form of artificial induction. I didn't consent, and I was never asked.
Mm,
Um, they're doing that to women, yeah, and people have no idea that they even have a choice. So yeah, absolutely. People need to know that you do have the right to an empowered birth. You do have the right to decide what happens to you and what happens to your baby, and you have the right. um,
absolutely. So,
you are a human being. You are not their human being. You are your human being.
yes, miss. In is this one, this is it's just your guess is as good as mine. But is this the main reason why people don't rise up and kill all the politicians? If we knew this, if we knew it and we were raised in an environment that made us strong, would we even allow this to happen? How are the doctors' heads still attached to their bodies? Clearly, if we aren't already doing it, it is because people are uninformed and therefore view these traumatic procedures as necessary. How many generations do you think we have left before every human is born autistic and can easily be manipulated into a transhuman? Where do you see this going in 20 years? And you can say, I see all the babies being born naturally in 20 years. That's on the table. I don't want you to want to like have my question lead you.
Right. Well, I can't say for sure exactly how it's going to be in 20 years. I am hoping that more people are waking up and recognizing their power and authority and having empowered births and creating empowered human beings. Um, I think that this system that's in place right now is in its death throes.
Mm.
I think they're lashing out and trying to do whatever they can to control us, but I don't think that we will roll over and die like that. Maybe I'm just being hopeful. Maybe I'm just trying to manifest what I want from life. But I'm praying that that we create an empowered society in 20 years, that people wake up.
That's enough time.
Resist.
That's enough time. If we all get together and we keep pushing the ball and we keep moving towards the goal, that is enough time, guys. We could change things so much in 1 year. We could change things so much in 5 years. In 20 years, we could have a world that we actually want to live in and not that we suffer through because we don't want to get reset in the incarnation matrix. Uh, we could have a place where we are able to make good laws and dictates and mandates for the betterment of humanity, where we can say, there's incentives to have a child in a natural way. When you do, we can show people, and we can change the world to where people will make their own good decisions, and to where the state is not a thing that people defer to when they don't feel qualified to have their own gut feeling or opinion. We can get it to a place where people claim their own personal freedom. I just really hope that we can do it soon because it's starting to look really scary.
Yeah, it is. But maybe I'm just naively optimistic, but
That
I think we have a fighting chance.
that's better. That's better than like hopelessly lost in doom. It totally is. I would rather have that any day. How many babies have you delivered? Are you a doula? You said.
I'm not. No, I have actually only ever attended one other birth, and that was my sister's. I was purely a spectator, and this was before my own first birth. So no, I've never delivered any other babies.
Well, you're still qualified to speak on it because you had two of them come out of you.
Yeah, I did catch my first baby with my own hand, or my second baby. I'm sorry, my free birth baby. I delivered him into my own arms, and that was incredibly empowering. Um, to think, oh my God, that's a whole ass baby right there, and then to have an actual baby in my arms that nobody took away. I was able to hold him and pick him up and smell him and breastfeed him, and it was the most. I mean, aside from the hormone rushes that were just better than any drug I could ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. It made me want to help other people to be able to birth their babies into peace and empowerment. So hopefully I will begin attending births and help other babies be born into the world in full love and appreciation. But so far I am 1 out of 2.
Well, as much as that other one went through the medical rigmarole, I'm sure that he now lives in full love and appreciation.
Oh yeah, he is amazing. He's very much loved and very smart.
If any of the listeners are pregnant, or if you have children on the way, is it all right if they were to contact you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would. My email is Lacey Pettigrew. That's LACIEPETTICREW @gmail.com.
Pettigrew. Crew?
Yes.
Okay.
Pettigrew with a C.
All right.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm I'm not a medical professional, and I'm not giving medical advice. Um, but I am trying to spread the word of empowerment and that you do have the right to choose. Um, there are a couple of references I'd like to share too.
Please,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So the book that really started me off on really truly understanding physiological birth was Orgasmic Birth. I know it sounds a little woo-woo, but
Sounds like a good time.
what's that?
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah. And it really, that's Orgasmic Birth by Elizabeth Davis. And there's also a documentary on Netflix about it. It's a little bit more medically interfering than the book makes it out to be. But the book was really great. And really explains the actual hormonal processes that happen during physiological birth, how to achieve those hormonal processes, what kind of things inhibit it, how to avoid that if you're in a hospital, if you have to be in a hospital, how to secure your right to be unhindered. There's also a couple of podcasts that I listened to that helped educate me a lot. And I'm not endorsing anything, but this is what helped me in my journey to understanding physiological birth. The Free Birth Society podcast has a couple of hundred of episodes of women sharing their stories of birthing in empowerment. And a lot of times after experiencing the trauma of birthing in the system and how we can move past that and sharing, it's just empowering to hear other stories of women who made it through, who had the courage to make it through and do what they felt was right. Indie Birth Midwifery podcast. I think their podcast is called Taking Back Birth. Had a lot of great information on self-care during prenatal care, performing your own prenatal care, or seeking a provider that is not going to hurt you or inhibit your likelihood of having the birth that you want. Finding a provider that will help you, a midwife that'll respect your rights to autonomy and informed consent. And then Janice Barcelo.
It's Janine Barcelo. Let me pull it up, folks, because it was fantastic. It was, to tell you the truth, it was quite disturbing.
It's really hard to listen to.
It is, but she's 60 years old. She's a doula. She's been all up in this game. It's JeaniceBarcelo. Janice Barcelo. She's got a great one on Higher Side Chats where Greg and her chop it all up about birth.
Yeah, she's also got an interview on Alchemy Radio podcast with John Gibbons, as well as she has a book called Birth Trauma and the Dark Side of Modern Medicine.
She gets into the Luciferian birth cabal, I think, a lot more probably than the other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, she gets way into all that. I didn't really get to dive too deeply into that, but it's a lot to cover there. And Hermione Hayes Klein is the founder of Human Rights and Childbirth. There was an episode of Free Birth Society that she was on called "If the Hospital Doesn't Know Your Rights, Do You Really Have Any?" And it was incredibly informative on how to negotiate your rights in childbirth when you're there having to birth in the system.
Yeah, don't trust these people to inform you about what rights you have, because they have been told that you don't have them, or they've been told that this is the way it's done. And so if we're to get them to treat us like fairly or not do unnecessary harmful things to us and our children, we actually have to go in there and say, look, you guys can't do that. And then if they say, no, well, but come on, it's normal, we have to say, well, we don't care. We have a right to refuse that service. We don't want it because it we will never be informed about informed consent unless it's total, unless they're like, oh shit, we don't have another option. Now we have to tell them they can say no. So
Mm-hmm.
we want our children to be powerful, and we want our children to grow up strong and in environments of love and care, and we want to do everything we can do for that. So let's know when to say no, folks. Lacey, what can we do to nurture our children in utero and in the birth process? How can we guide them through the first years of their life and set them up to retain their humanity?
That's a great question. As far as an utero goes, love them. I don't know if you watched the episodes of Crow 777 where they established that the spark of life is when you become a human being. But I thought that was really great. I know there's a lot there for us calling back, but I don't want to get into abortion or anything because that's just a whole other topic. But I think it's undeniable that life begins at the spark of life.
Conception.
And you become a human being at that time. I personally experienced when that happened to my second baby. It was shortly a few days after conception.
Yeah.
And I was meditating and I felt a presence, a spirit with me. And it was like, that feeling of when somebody's watching you from a window from like a house far away or something, and like you automatically kind of like look over your shoulder and be like, damn, that person's staring at me. It was like that. It was like, whoa, there's a presence here. And yeah, I felt that spark of life with my first child. And I knew that this is a baby. This is going to be a human being with me. And there's a lot of info on conscious conception and calling in the spirit of your child, which is great information. Definitely something to look into if you're considering becoming a parent for the first time or again. So definitely being conscious of the little spirit that's going to be with you or with your partner, loving it, speaking to it, giving that child love from the beginning, wanting the baby has a lot to do with it. And I mean, nobody is perfect. No, I'm not saying that that you're being a horrible parent by saying, oh shit, I'm pregnant. But being loved and wanted from the very beginning is huge in the development of the soul that you're bringing to bear.
The first thought is not our responsibility. It's what we do with that. So I say, I don't have any children, but I say, if my wife gets pregnant and then I think, oh shit, how am I going to take care of this kid? Well, that was my first thought. That's all right. But then what I do with that is I can either water that and worry about that, or I can water, you know what? We're going to love this baby. We're going to take care of it. It's going to be a blessing, and we'll give it the best possible life. Then not only is that more likely to happen, the vibrational energy of those thoughts that's magnified times 100 when you're a teeny tiny little thing, and those are the first wavelengths that are hitting you. And that's, to me, that's why we see people that are incredibly impoverished, people that are not given they can't read. They can't teach their children how to read. And if you look at their family dynamic and their children, they're seeing these children as a blessing, and then these children are blessed. When we see things as a problem, they become problematic.
Exactly. You create the universe around you. Your outer world is a reflection of your inner world, and when you begin that world for a new life, feelings of love and blessings and peace, that, I mean, how could it not affect the way that person develops?
Hmm. And then when they come out, what do we do with them?
Well, try not to poison them. Not vaccinating would be a huge thing, in my opinion. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to me. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who disagree with me, but
Fuck them.
yeah, try not to poison your child. Will help a lot. Breastfeeding, again, I guess formula is better than nothing at all, but I don't think there's any argument that breastfeeding your child is giving it the best opportunity to develop a healthy brain, a healthy body, and a healthy spirit. Um, and I mean, reading to your baby in utero and as a baby and as a toddler really affects the way a brain develops. Just being awake and teaching your child to be awake and to think critically, um, it's huge. Creating more people who aren't buying into the agenda of the establishment of big pharma, of the doctors telling them that this is how it has to be, because it doesn't. Raising critical thinkers is how we're going to get out of this, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, encourage your children to think and use their brains, because
Mm-hmm.
that's honestly, all things, all power is great and useful, but brain power, the pen is so much mightier than the sword, you guys. We There will always be super soldiers out there, and I encourage people to do physical exercise. I certainly don't do enough of it, but it's beneficial. And I encourage you to encourage your children to do this, but I really encourage you to encourage your children to read, encourage them to write poetry, encourage them to use the trivium and open that brain up, because that brain is there to be used. It's not there to be weaponized against us and booby trapped. And if we encourage our children to use logic and reason and stuff, it just opens a whole doorway into a universe of creativity, a universe of possibility versus this little narrow, tiny path. So I just say encourage them, encourage us. I'm a child, you're a child. Let's encourage each other. Now, do you want to? I know we've been here for a while. Do you want? I got a couple more questions that are not birth related. Is there anything else you'd like to say about birth or children or anything you want to get off your chest in general?
I think I summed up everything pretty good as far as what I wanted to say. I didn't get into Pitocin too much, but I think that's okay. Just research Pitocin, research what it actually is.
Petocin.
Pitocin.
Pitocin. Okay,
Yes.
yeah, and
The doctors will lie to you. They have lied to me and told me that it's exactly the same thing as actual oxytocin, and it's not. It prevents the body, it tricks the body into thinking that you've already got oxytocin going, and it prevents other hormonal processes from happening. It prevents the release of beta endorphins and the other hormonal cascades that should happen naturally when you naturally produce oxytocin. Pitocin shuts all that down. and it creates artificially strong contractions that lead to a much greater chance of uterine rupture, of hemorrhage, all kinds of really horrible, like fatal complications. And it says on the label that it's not meant for non-medically indicated induction, because it is dangerous. But it's used off-label all the time, as well as some other things like sorbitol and other things they use to induce labor in women. And they'll give you Pitocin during a normal labor just to speed it up. They'll give it to you immediately after labor to birth the placenta quicker, which can be also incredibly dangerous and lead to hemorrhage. They will pull on the placenta, on the umbilical cord, to remove the placenta, which is putting you at a greater increased risk of hemorrhage and death. And then they'll tell you that you can't ever have a natural birth again because you were at risk of, because you hemorrhaged the last time, and they don't trust you.
Because we made you hemorrhage. Yeah, we made you hemorrhage, so
when the placenta is ripped from the uterine wall, it begins to bleed tremendously, and that can cause you to either be severely damaged by the rapid loss of blood, or it can cause death. The placenta naturally releases from the uterine wall by oxytocin. A lot of times if you breastfeed your child, it'll stimulate those oxytocin dumps and get those contractions going and naturally release the placenta from the uterine lining, thereby severely reducing your chances of hemorrhage. But with Pitocin and the controlled cord traction is what they call it when they pull on the placenta or on the umbilical cord. So yeah, just a huge amount of stuff to research on Pitocin, and not that huge. I mean, it's dangerous. That's it. Oxytocin that's naturally occurring is much safer for birth.
Totally.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that in there.
No, that's great. I mean, I'm picking up what you're putting down, and everybody else will too. The fact is, folks, if you watched this, it's because you cared enough to watch it. And I'm sorry, me and Lacey do the best we can. We're just a little bit slow. So, do you have time for 2 questions that are not birth related?
Sure.
I know this is hard to talk about. This stuff is, it's upsetting. It's upsetting. So we're gonna leave you guys with some random conspiracy goodness. Now, what are your favorite conspiracies other than this to dig into? Like, I always like to mix it up with my guests and get their take on things. So, what are your favorite ones? And then, what do you think about the Mexican beer virus?
Oh, okay. So, it's really hard to say it to people who don't buy it, but we've really been lied to about the place that we live on. There's no photographs of a globe Earth. It's amazing how deep the lies go. But that might be my favorite one so far because it is just, it's like king conspiracy. Like there's all these conspiracies. There's 9/11 and all kinds of things. But when you get to realize that things are actually what they look like, and not what you've been told they look like or what they are. Because I can walk down to the ocean and I see no curvature. I saw just the other day, I was standing pass, and I saw an island, and I decided to go home and Google Map it to see how far away that island was, and it was 6 miles away. And then I Googled how far can you see from the ocean, and it's like 2.7 miles. I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer after you actually finally push your ego past and think, damn, maybe they are really lying to us. It's incredibly freeing, I think.
Oh, for sure. What I found, I got into flat Earth about 6 years ago, and at this point, it was super far out. I mean, because I was already into conspiracy big time. I was digging deeply into all the dark occult stuff, and then I realized, like, wait, no, this goes down to a level where it's created my view of the Earth and the solar system. So before that, I was also very into secret space program and stuff. And then it made me realize, like, if this is a lie, that means for sure there's a God or a creator. It could be us for all we know, but for sure somebody made this place. This place is not an accident. And that was always inherently disempowering to me. I had watched Carl Sagan Cosmos. I had seen I was a piece of dust in a black void in the middle of outer space. If there was other beings, those beings looked at me like I was an ant. Now I realize this whole thing, it's a show, and we are the stars of the show. Whatever creatures are out there, maybe above the firmament, watching or beings, those things, they made this place, but they made it for us. They didn't make it. This isn't like a place, one of many random pods where there's just infinite different beings all splayed out accidentally. No, it's our little dome. It's our terrarium. And that makes us know how important we are. Because you guys are far more important than a piece of dust flying through space. Me and Lacey love
Definitely
you.
at risk of just being completely eliminated by a solar flare or an
Yeah.
asteroid.
Yeah. It's just crazy. It's
Yeah, so that
craziness.
one, and maybe the Mandela effect.
Oh, I was gonna say what about the Mandela effect? What the fuck is that? Maybe interdimensional beings blowing bomb tokes into our Truman Show bubble? Like I've tried to explain it in the ways that I could fit within bookends that even involve words and not going like, the fuck, huh? What is that? What is going on here? But
But
I've
it's
got,
undeniable to me at this point. I mean,
oh,
there's just too much to deny at this point. Like something's going on. Something's fucky.
it's for sure, son. There's mass fuckery going about. This is what fascinates me, and I always like to hear people's 2 cents. Do you think it's a natural thing, or do you think it's somebody has like maybe weaponized time travel or quantum technology?
I think it's a natural thing. I think it's a God thing somehow. I'm not sure how. I think they would like us to think that they're doing it, that they
Yeah.
can change time and space, and that they're responsible for all this stuff. And I don't know, maybe we can access it and um, alter things, but I think ultimately it's a natural thing. I think this is how our world is. And I think there was something in the Bible about how the Bible is the living word, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
really took on a new meaning when I started listening to the Mandela effect stuff and experiencing the changes because the words actually change.
Oh yeah, the wolf and the lamb. You
I
guys,
went to a thrift shop and picked up an old Bible to look it up, and when I read that particular verse, my blood ran cold.
yeah.
Hey, can we pause for just a second and then feel like you asked me something else and I totally blanked.
Oh, what do you think about this Mexican beer virus,
Oh,
Lacey?
right. I think it's a virus of the mind. Um, I don't know if there actually is an illness that's like hurting people and killing people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody that suffered from some mysterious illness that's incredibly harmful. I'm not saying that there aren't. I think a lot of it has to do with the 5G and all that. I definitely think that it's more about enacting martial law and and ushering in the new world order or whatever
Mm-hmm.
than about virus, because even if it is an actual virus that's like about like the flu, I mean, this is a ridiculous response. They closed down the beach here. Um, Nobody wants to be within 6 feet of each other at the beach in the first place. The beach is where you get sunshine, which is going to be the biggest thing to help heal you, help your immune system. The ocean air and the sunshine, the beach is super healing. But they closed down the beach and they're telling everybody to stay at home if they can. Now, here we're not on lockdown, we're not on house arrest right now. But I think it's coming soon. I've seen the court orders that certain counties in my state are limiting um, court cases and proceedings to things like things that are urgent about the safety of people, as well as warrants for violation of quarantine, warrants for collection of bodily fluids, vaccine,
Max Eden. Max
mandated
Eden.
vaccine violations.
Oh, what? Vaccine violations?
Yeah, so there was this document floating around. I'm not sure if you shared it or if somebody else did, but I shared it also on Facebook. But the very bottom one was about court cases involving violation of mandatory vaccine laws.
Yeah, I did. I shared that, and that
Yeah,
told you how to legally get out of these requirements. Was it something like that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I just saw the one that was what was ordered to. They're not seeing any other court cases aside from those particular things. There was a list of things that they're seeing court cases about, hearing court cases about. But so yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious that this is all about rolling out an agenda. The whole quarantine 40 days. I mean, it's clearly a satanic ritual to me. And then with the Georgia Guidestones 40th anniversary the other day on 322 or whatever,
Mm.
I mean, it's all clearly been planned for a long time. And then there's another thing in the movie Tangled about Rapunzel, where she was quarantined in the tower. Um, the city that she came from was called Corona. I thought that was crazy. And also, oh gosh. So I saw an article yesterday about how the stock markets jumped up 2112 points or something. And instantly that reminded me of this Rush song from 2112.
Oh yeah.
Temples of Syrinx says, oh, look around this world we made, equality, our stock and trade, come and join the brotherhood of man. And then, a few verses later it says, oh, our great computers fill the hallowed halls. All the gifts of life are held within our walls. And I was like, damn, that seems kind of quarantine agenda to me. To all the gifts of life are held within our walls. you know. So it seems clearly encoded to me from the get-go, from however long ago they started planning this. Um, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm staying hopeful, but it's kind of hard to be.
Well, it's good that we're trying to nurture an abundance of hope. At least with this podcast, sometimes I feel like I'm watering a gigantic fear garden with mine, but nonetheless, folks, keep your heads up and keep your heads clear. Don't let them put all this poisonous BS propaganda in there. Go give people hugs. Give people hugs. It's not. I mean, it's viruses aren't even passed the way that they tell us they're passed, anyways. So it really should. If you're awake and aware, this should not bother you. This social distancing, quarantine nonsense. What should bother us is the vaccine agenda rollout and the military martial law. I just say stand up, folks. Don't accept that you deserve to be quarantined. Don't accept that you have to be afraid. I understand what it's like because I go out right now and I see the same thing as you. Nobody's out. Uh, People are standoffish. They're a bit afraid of each other, but I just encourage you, don't be like that. We don't have to be like that. Just because they're making all these new laws and stuff, don't let it change who you are in your heart. I truly hate to see the liberty to be happy and be kind to one another taken away, because they can take so much away from us, but we still have the right to do that, guys. So don't give that up. All right, Lacey, it's been wonderful to have you.
Yeah, it's a great conversation.
Absolutely. And is there anywhere where we can check out? Are you doing any work that you got out there on the interweb?
I'm sorry, I lost you on that. What
Oh,
was that?
is there anywhere that we can check out? Is there anywhere that you have work that you're doing on the interweb?
Not really at this moment. I haven't really established myself as in my career path yet. Um, Definitely hoping to move on further and to start educating and empowering and hopefully assisting people to come into this world in love and empowerment. Um, don't really have a portfolio yet, though.
All right, guys. Well, if you want
Thanks
to
for
know,
giving me my first opportunity to get out and talk about it.
absolutely, it's my pleasure. If you guys want to know more, contact Lacey at laceypetacrew@gmail.com. And hey, this is as far as we can tell. You guys, that's our 2 cents. You can spend it how you want.